Hi there, Leah from Lakela Music here, and today I want to start a discussion on the subject of exams. If you're in the US watching that, it might not be very relevant. I think exams are less of a tradition there. You do regular recitals instead. But in many parts of the world, including here in Ireland and in the UK, music exams tend to be part and parcel of the learning experience. So in this video I want to talk about the pros and cons of taking exams and tell you about the approach I've recently adopted, which is kind of a compromise that will make the whole exam experience a bit less stressful for students. As always, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe so you don't miss out on new videos, and let's get started. So let's start by considering the reasons why exams are a good idea for you or your child studying piano. So number one, exams provide a structure, and without them, it's possible that you won't end up learning a lot of the skills that you need to become a well-rounded player. I know from working with adult students who have their own repertoires that they want to focus on, that we often don't work on things like scales, listening skills, or sight reading that, if you're working towards an exam, we definitely have to make time for. Now, it can be the case that they don't really need that stuff, or that I've already done some of it in the past, but there's a lot to be said for continuing it, and frankly, that's on me. I could impose that structure myself depending on the student, but it tends to happen on the basis of need, like when something comes up that highlights a particular scale or a technique or an oral skill, rather than being something we regularly make time for, as we do when we're preparing for exams. So whereas a student who decides to go down the exam route will get that structure and a variety of skills practice as a matter of course, because they're going to be tested on it. That really stands them as they progress through to more difficult repertoire, that they have the understanding and the technical ability to tackle it. Number two, so it provides a sense of progress and a goal to work towards. I've noticed that when a student, usually when they come into their teens, they decide they want to take a break from exams and do other repertoire, fun stuff, popular stuff. It can be sometimes difficult to maintain the motivation and the direction, and they can run out of steam pretty quickly, especially if they set their sights on a piece of music that might not really be within their ability yet. So that can be a really dangerous time for the study of music, because they can get frustrated and give up, or just gradually lose interest because the repertoire that they're working on might be fun, but it's either not challenging enough or it's too challenging, and they lose that sense of progress and improvement. So exams definitely give you that, and there's usually enough variety in the repertoire so that they can choose music that they like. I usually try to work in some extra pop stuff alongside to maintain interest, and as I said, I'll be telling you a little later about the strategy that I'm adopting that I'm hopeful will prevent exam burnout. Number three, so I touched on repertoire in the last point, but it's another reason why I think the exam system is actually pretty good overall. When a new exam syllabus is being released, whether that's annually in the case of the Royal Irish Academy of Music, or I think every 2 years with the Associated Board. I'm not sure how often other exam boards change up their syllabus, but a lot of thought goes into choosing the pieces for each grade, and there's often some really well-known repertoire that most students will want to learn, and some less well-known gems that become really favourites of the students. There's always a balance between music from different eras and different styles, so you don't end up playing all just one kind of music, because that's what appeals to you. So students really develop musical flexibility, and they end up knowing how to tackle things like swing rhythms and syncopation on one hand, and baroque articulation and pedaling styles on the other, that they just absorb over time, and that actually gives a lot of creative freedom ultimately. Number four, exams give students an opportunity to perform, and for piano students that's particularly important because they get fewer opportunities to perform than students who play orchestral instruments, who often play in ensembles and school orchestras. For piano students, performance can become a real ordeal, so any opportunity to play for someone else is really important, and especially the one that comes with a certain amount of consequence, because learning to deal with nerves is very much part of any musician's life. 5. Standards. If you are working through pieces on your own, there's a fair chance that you will move on to something else once you reach a level that you're happy with in that piece, but it might fall short of a really high standard. So even if you're working with a teacher, the chances are they're going to be aware if your interest in a piece is declining because you've been working on it for a few months, and to be honest, do you really stay with the piece until you've got all the articulation exactly right, and you've experimented with the dynamics, and you know it so well that you can hear every note in your sleep? Or do you practice it until the notes and rhythm are roughly how you think they should be, and then you move on to the next piece you've been dying to play? Or worse, do you learn to play the part of the music that everyone knows and ignore the rest? Can you really play Fur Elise or just the opening section? Whereas if you're preparing for an exam, you get experience of what it's like to really learn a piece inside out, to really study it and find out what gives it its character and its personality, which is usually articulation and dynamics, and that translates over into the music you learn outside of exams. You learn to finish what you start. So those are some reasons to really consider doing exams or encouraging your child to do exams. So let's have a quick look at some of the drawbacks. So exams can become a real treadmill. You know, you finish one level, you start the next. You learn your grade 3 pieces and then you move on to your grade 4, rinse, repeat. I mean, I do think teaching has improved a lot in recent years, but I can't tell you how many people I've met that tell me that, you know, they went as far as grade 8 piano and they can't play a thing. And that's generally the reason why. They didn't really get a chance to mature as musicians because their only goal was to get to the next level as soon as possible. So generally, they won't have done any repertoire except what was required to pass the next exam, and as likely as not, at each level they were playing right up against the edge of their ability, so that can't have been fun. So I really want to change that approach because I mean, it really shouldn't be such a grind. And the second drawback is, you know, a big reason for falling into that trap is comparison with others, either by the student themselves or with younger students. It can be, you know, the parents who have heard someone else say that their child is doing the grade 2 exam this year, so they naturally start to worry that, you know, their child should also be doing that, and the push is on. It can be quite detrimental to the student themselves because everybody learns at a different pace, and you know, everyone's at a different point in their development, so they might not be ready to start doing exams, and it can become quite a traumatic process for them. Other kids, of course, are absolutely, you know, they thrive on challenge. So I'm not saying that's the case for everyone, just that, you know, I've seen it often enough. So I suppose that neither of those last points really constitutes a reason not to do exams at all, but I am suggesting that we approach the exam question with caution, because taking an exam and, you know, hopefully passing it with flying colours, it should be, as far as possible, a happy experience, or at least not traumatic. So I've taken a decision recently that I'll be communicating with new students, and especially their parents, that I'm going to be taking a slightly different tack. So that is that my new students will only take an exam when they're capable of playing at 2 or even 3 levels above that. So in Ireland, for example, we have 3 exam levels before grade 1, so elementary, preliminary and primary, and then we go to grades 1 to 8. So what I want to do is bring my beginner students to at least primary level before I enter them for an elementary exam. It really shouldn't take a student more than a month to prepare for an exam, alongside whatever else they're working on. And the exam itself should feel easy, not stressful. I mean, it should definitely not feel like they're just barely ready for it. So then, you know, well, what can a student say if somebody asks what level they're playing at, you know? So they can say, well, I'm playing at a grade 3 level, and I'll just say I'm doing my grade 1 this year. But they're really going to ace that exam because it's well within their technical ability. So then that's a confidence builder too. And in the meantime, there's such a huge amount of graded repertoire to work with and, you know, move forward with at the right pace for the student. So that might just give you something to consider. Maybe you or your child is struggling with exam preparation, and if it's sucking the joy out of their lessons, you know, maybe it's time to have a chat with their teacher, who might be me, and see if you can come up with a different plan. So, I mean, exams are great. I'm all for them. You can probably tell I'm in favour of them, but let's go at them in a way that supports the student's overall development and doesn't inadvertently do damage. So I'm really keen to know your opinions about this one, so please do let me know in the comments. What's your experience been of exams, and do you agree or disagree with my conclusions? Leave me a comment and I'll see you soon, and in the meantime, happy practicing.